Hi, I'm Wayne Hoffman, President of Idaho Freedom Foundation, and continuing with our series looking at the debates of the gubernatorial candidates. Do you know what a fun thing to do is? It's to watch debates in our office and talk about public policy. So I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. And this video is specific on education. So let's go ahead and get started.
The next governor is going to inherit the final phase of the 5-year plan on K-12 and will inherit a higher education task force set of recommendations that was basically left untouched by this legislative session. If you have to pick one priority in that whole network from pre-K to PhD, how would you define success in education?
Can I just say one thing again about this question? It assumes that, number one, the task force recommendations on K-12 education and the task force recommendations on higher education are right. Well, maybe they're not. Maybe actually they're the wrong recommendations. But the sort of suggestion that somehow we've charted this course and we must continue is kind of hogwash.
Your watch.
Success in K-12 education for me is very simple. Third grade reading literacy, math competency, and then we have got to connect Idaho kids to Idaho jobs with vocational and technical training in our high schools. There are examples of that around the state. As you travel the state and see what's happening, we need to scale those successes, share best practices, and we need technical education in our high schools.
It's really true that we've sort of forgotten that technical education is extremely important, and right now we're on this quest to put as many kids through higher education as possible into college and university settings when maybe they don't need to do that. And it's also true that there are a lot of success stories taking place across the state, but those success stories aren't getting shared. So I appreciate the fact that Tommy Alquist mentions this.
That would absolutely be the priority. It'll give us the mentorship we need for these kids. We have a wage problem. These kids will come out making more money. And more importantly, companies all around this state, when you go visit companies and say, what's the main thing you need? They say healthcare premiums are killing us and we need kids ready to work. If we connect those kids to jobs and create that line of sight, you'll watch our economy strengthen and you'll watch kids stay right here in Idaho.
The thing that concerns me about this commentary, most of it is pretty good, but the thing that really concerns me is a lot of this, what he's talking about, have nothing to do with the government. The government shouldn't have anything to do with it at all, and it really should be left up to the private sector. If we allow the private sector to do that, the moment the state says it's our responsibility to connect kids to jobs, then it ceases to be the responsibility of the private sector. I think that that's something that needs to be brought out in this conversation a bit more. I wonder if we'll hear that.
Let's start with the earliest priority, with the earliest children, third grade literacy. Kindergarten reading scores this year were the lowest we've seen in 11 years. How is it possible to get to...
Isn't that disturbing, by the way, all the money that we put into public education and our reading scores have actually gone down? It's fascinating to me that he's not talking about that and no one else on that panel is talking about that.
Third grade literacy, third grade proficiency, without addressing early education before those children arrive in kindergarten, because those kindergarten scores are a reflection of the children as they come into school, not the school system itself.
Sure, and I know, Kevin, you're very familiar with what's going on in Caldwell with the Promise Neighborhood, the P16 program, and now offering pre-K in Caldwell in every elementary school. I think that there is no doubt that every community is going to need to figure out how to be part of the solution. But I do not think state government right now is investing money wisely in K-12 education, let alone having the state get involved in that right now. But I do believe there's ways to get our kids ready for this third grade reading. I'll also tell you, if you think that's the only problem, you need to spend more time out and around Idaho. We've gone and interviewed over 80 school districts and spent time in these schools around Idaho. And there are several more factors that go into this. We are right now, for every dime we give a school district, we're adding another layer of regulation. Our teachers are fatigued, they're underpaid, and we need to figure out how to clear out some of those regulations and let our teachers teach. You hear that everywhere you go around the state, and we'll do that because right now we've been in a pattern of over-regulation, fatiguing our teachers, and it has to stop. And then we can get back to proficiency both in reading and in math, but we need wholesale change. It's not working. What's been happening for a long time has not been working in Idaho. Money's not going to be the solution. It's going to be new leadership. It's going to be new vision. It's going to be modernizing our education and getting these kids ready for a modern economy.
In 2014, though, on pre-K, you wrote a guest opinion voicing support for a state-funded pre-K pilot. Now you're saying that there is no room or need for state funding of pre-K. What changed?
What's changed is the trip. We took 26 people down to Promised Neighborhoods in Utah and visited Kearns Elementary School and found that they were doing pre-K down there without any taxpayer money or without the state being involved. We came back, we're doing it in Caldwell, and it's working very, very well. That's what's changed, and we need models like that around the state.
All right.
The thing that really concerns me is that at one point in time, he said that the state should be involved in pre-kindergarten. Now I hope that he's learned that that's not a good idea. But it also concerns me that he didn't understand early on that having the government involved in early childhood education is not the right way to go. I take him at his word, however, that he does not intend to expand the state education system to include more kids before the age of 5. But again, it's somewhat concerning that his position used to be something else entirely.
Governor Little, the same question for you. From pre-K to PhD, what is the top priority that defines success?
Well, I've got a concrete plan about what we're going to do in early childhood, and that is to put some revenue available to those school districts, because these kids are vastly different.
When he says put more revenue into schools, be aware what he's actually saying is we're going to take more of your money and put more of that money into an expanded public education system. Lieutenant Governor Little is already on record as supporting early childhood education as a state investment. I'm not sure if he's really clear when he says these things in this debate, but that is what he's told legislators. He is on record. That's not something that I have made up. He is on record. So to be very, very blunt, yes, he does support expanding the education system in Idaho to include more children who are not in the education system currently and would be defined as pre-kindergarten.
The school districts in Idaho all my life, not just in the recent campaign. And I know what the differences are, and there's not one solution in Rexburg that matches up to a problem in Dietrich or Moyer Springs. So you put resources available. Busing for kindergarten, full-day kindergarten.
Paid by the state.
The option of pre-K.
Paid by the state.
Summer reading programs.
Paid by the state.
Reading coaches.
Paid by the state.
Changing the ratio of teachers in kindergarten, first, second, third grade.
Paid by the state.
A pool of revenue that's available to say, our gold standard is reading proficiently at the end of the third grade. Trustees, parents, and families, you figure out, but that...
Because that's working so well.
To put half of our state money into education and not have our kids reading proficiently at the end of the third grade is something that we absolutely have to get right. We finally got concurrence on what we're going to use to measure that. We finally got an adoption of a reading indicator that we had, and then it went away and it came back. But today we have that consensus that needs to be fulfilled, and that list of options ought to be made available to those school districts and let the people that are closest to these kids decide how to get it done.
Maybe the people that are closest to the kids are the families. Maybe the government doesn't need to be involved. Yes, he's absolutely right that the solution in Rexburg and Moyer Springs and Chalice and Boise and Nampa are completely different. But that doesn't mean that the government has to have this centralized repository of money that we give out to all these communities to create a solution on the backs of taxpayers. It's completely unnecessary. All of us support early childhood education. No one I speak to ever says, I'm against early childhood education. Well, who would be? Why would you be? What we're really against is the idea that the government's going to come in and fix this problem when we already have a K-12 education system that fails on all the counts that he just mentioned. Really, what he's talking about is expanding the current government education system. He's defining it different ways, and he's talking about this sort of locally driven engine to do it, but it's taxpayer money being used to subsidize a bigger footprint on behalf of the government over our individual communities and our children.
One aspect of your education platform is talking about raising the minimum teacher salary to $40,000 a year. Now, a lot of school administrators will say that the big problem that they're facing right now is trying to get more money to veteran teachers, to teachers who lead, to teachers who mentor in the schools. How do you find funding for that?
Well, we're going to have to put more money into the grid. We know that.
All right. Well, first of all, we now have a career ladder that we're putting a lot more money into. I don't know how much more money we need to put into public school education at the teacher salaries. I don't think that they know. There's never enough money. Now you see this debate all over the country where teachers are going on strike in order to get more and more money. Really what this amounts to is we ought to pay great teachers what they're worth. We really should. But you can't pay great teachers what they're worth when you have these arbitrary, centralized government programs to provide teachers with essentially the same benefits. In order for you to actually pay great teachers great incomes, you have to also recognize that there are lousy teachers that are getting great incomes also, and they shouldn't be paid as much. That's a reality. Because we don't have merit pay in our education system, this is what we get. It's a reality.
We know that when we get through with the next year, that there's going to have to be money go into those salaries as we go on. But if we don't send that signal that we want starting teachers, what I'm fearful of is the best and the brightest won't sign up for college to become educators. And we have to send that message far and wide that we value our educators.
But you can't do that when you just say every starting teacher is going to make $40,000. There are going to be some starting teachers who are worth $100,000. I'm not kidding. There are some rock stars out there who truly deserve $100,000 out of the gate. And then you have some duds that maybe only deserve 30 or 35 or 40,000. I don't know. But the point is, if we arbitrarily say, here's the starting teacher salary, you're going to get exactly the same result we have today. We've been having this conversation for as long as I can remember, back when we had starting teacher salaries at $25,000. Everybody said we ought to raise it back then. Do you think this conversation is going to end well? 5 years from now, we're going to be saying, well, a starting teacher salary should be $60,000 or $70,000. Really, starting teacher salary ought to be whatever that starting teacher is worth, not some arbitrary number as devised by members of the legislature or the executive branch.
We value our teachers, and we want the best and brightest to get into the classroom.
Yeah, the best and brightest get into the classroom when you stop this gobbledygook and start paying teachers exactly what they're worth and not something that's arbitrarily set.
If elected, you also inherit a goal that you have spoken in favor of for several years, the 60% goal of getting 60% of young adults to have a degree or a certificate.
Oh my gosh, one of the worst public policies ever devised by the Otter administration, 60% goal. What that means is it doesn't matter whether people should be going to college or shouldn't be going to college. We're going to force as many kids through the college and university system as humanly possible. But wait, it gets worse when we get to that in a second.
It's flatline. How do you change that?
Well, we're making progress in there at the lower levels. It takes a while. The investments we make in K-12, it takes a while before they walk out the door as seniors. I think a lot of and I said this when I testified at resolution both times, I think a lot of the low-hanging fruit there is certificates, is career technical, whether it starts in high school, whether it's affiliated with a community college, or whether it's one of
career technical, but we put all this emphasis into college and university degrees. And what that's resulted in is a bunch of kids going to college and not ever getting a degree. If you go to Boise State University today as a freshman, odds are you're not going to get a degree of any kind whatsoever. There are only 3 in 10, roughly, will get a degree after 4 years. The belle of the ball, as I like to say when it comes to college graduation rates, is actually the University of Idaho. If you go to the University of Idaho after about 5 years, about half of the kids will graduate with a degree. That's stunning. And that's what we're funding in Idaho.
Rather career technical. If we can broaden certificates, that's going to move that number up a lot. And I think certificates are a big part of it.
Congressman Labrador, same question to you from pre-K to PhD. Pick your top priority and explain why it's the top priority.
My top priority, Kevin, is that every child who graduates from high school should have a meaningful opportunity after high school.
Frickin' men. How hard is that?
Every child who graduates from high school should either have a 2-year degree, an associate, or enough credits working towards that associate's degree, should have some sort of technical training, some diploma or certificate in technical training, and more importantly, that those kids who haven't learned the things that they have to learn, we should spend those last 2 years remediating them. Right now we're spending millions of dollars in the community college remediating children who should have been remediated at the high school level. That's my top priority. Now you talk about pre-K. I don't see how anybody can advocate for pre-K when we're not even spending the money from K through 12 wisely and adequately.
Look, even if we were spending the money in K-12 adequately and wisely, should we really expand the government education system? No, I don't think so. I understand his point, and he's pretty much accurate. But to be clear, even if we were to argue that every dollar going to the K-12 system is perfectly spent, no money wasted whatsoever, that's not an excuse to expand the government education
We
system.
need to make sure that what we do from K through 3rd grade is appropriate, is adequate. And one of the things that we're failing at is parent participation. The reason we do so well in some of the results that we have, in spite of not spending as much money in Idaho, is because many parents participate with their kids. But my wife is a school psychologist. She was able to spend time in the schools working as a volunteer while our kids were growing and going through the school system. She could always identify the kids who were not being read to at school, at home, who were not having the opportunity that our children were having. We need to encourage the parents of these children to actually participate in their children's education. And we can do that through the social services offices that we have in the state. I think it's unwise to spend more money on education. We already spent 60%. You want to spend more money on education? You pass my 555 plan. We grow the economy in Idaho, and 60% of a growing economy will be more for education. But I think it would be a huge mistake to put in pre-kindergarten.
All right, he's kind of right. I appreciate what he's trying to say. First of all, government isn't going to solve this problem. Social services, government agencies, I really don't think that that's a really good idea. The fact is, what we really need to do is get government out of the way. You get government out of the way, and you make communities responsible for one another again, where individuals are talking to individuals and families are talking to families and neighborhoods are interacting with one another. That's how you solve the problem. If Johnny can't read by 3rd grade, you don't have the Department of Health and Welfare intervene and say, hey, we've got some resources over here that's going to be able to help you out. Really what that is utilizing the resources in our own communities that are not part of government. Believe it or not all the solutions come from government agencies. I may be being a little bit hard on Raul there, but that's a little bit of a bridge too far. He's actually quite correct when he's talking about the current education system, pre-kindergarten, remediation, all that kind of stuff. It's just, he just goes just a hair too far a little bit towards the end of that commentary on the public education system. I again thank you for watching. If you want to learn more about our positions on a variety of different issues and all the great work that our team at Idaho Freedom Foundation are doing, please visit us at idahofreedom.org.